When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just
Hi friends, welcome. Today is June 7th and we are here with Karen on her documentary screening. We are also live in Facebook. This is our first Facebook live, so we are ready for any kind of surprises or any kind of Facebook things we don't know. Karen is here, so we'll be hearing from Karen about on her own perspective on her documentary, and we also will be able to ask you questions. Karen, welcome.
Sure. Hi.
How are you? Can you hear me, Karen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. How are you?
I'm fine.
Nice to have you. Thank you for joining us today, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we have another friend who means a lot to both Karen and me. Urs will be telling us about Karen, and I think we will have the chance to understand why we are doing this, why it's Urs who is introducing Karen today, because there is a big, huge love and friendship there. Urs, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So we would like to hear from you about Karen. Urs, would you introduce Karen?
Okay.
Please.
Well, first, of course, my pleasure. So Karen Shenfeld is a writer, poet, editor, and filmmaker. Among her commercial film projects, she was engaged by YAP Films as the head researcher on Friendly Fire, which was aired by the CBC. Karen has written, shot, produced 2 independent documentaries. These include Il Giardino, The Gardens of Little Italy, which screened at the Planet in Focus Film Festival, and Maggie and Merle, which screened at the Real Heart Festival. She has also published 4 books of poetry, including To Measure the World, which was just released by Ecstasis Editions. That's the formal bio.
Yep.
And actually, I'm going to do something little surprising for you, Karen. I know you're not ready for this, but there's a reason why Urs is here to talk about you. And she was ready. She knew she was going to do this. Before we start about your amazing work, and I know I will be inviting you for your other documentary, and we'll be working on some projects on writing and your amazing work too. But today, I'd like to first ask you, how would you introduce Urs if you had to? What would you say about Urs? Let's focus with that little.
Me.
Yes, I know you're not ready for this, so surprise us
Fine.
with anything.
I would say that Urs here is a very special person. I met her perhaps 10 years ago when I somehow saw a notice someplace that there was going to be a meeting called Shalom Salam, which was a peace group to foment peace between Muslims and Jews and Christians, if they want to join in, and to try to come up with solutions or ideas about how to bring peace to the Middle East. And the group was founded by Urs and a man called Stephen Holt during a very dark time. It was during a bombing period, actually. and a group of Torontonians came out to meet. And I was one of the first people to join, although I wasn't the very first. And then since then, I learned that Urs was very active in politics. She has run herself for politics. She has worked for actually, I think, all three of the political parties for different people. I guess she just works for those who she thinks is good. She has hosted television programs. She's a great community leader. She is a model, I think, of how people can live in a multicultural society in peace. She has a love for her own culture and also a love of other people's cultures. So I think if we all modeled ourselves after Urs here, the world would be a very good place.
Well, I agree.
I'm embarrassed. Sorry. Thank you so much.
So I hope that that's okay. I mean, that wasn't a formal thing, but. And Urs is my friend.
So tell us a little about your friendship.
Well, we became friends as part of that meetup group. We found over time that over the years, less and less people wanted to come. You know, people are busy in Toronto. Everyone's busy with their own lives. People, I guess, have ADHD when it comes to being in groups. But some women, we actually met separately outside of the group. Urs, me, a woman named Nomi Drori, who's Israeli, another woman named Nari, who came from Algeria, another woman she has a fake name on Facebook, but that's what I always call her in my head, Mikwet Lee, who was a Russian Jewish immigrant who lived in Israel for a while. So we got together a couple of times for dinners ourselves, which was very nice. And Urs and I chat frequently on Facebook. I got her addicted to this Turkish TV show, which is a little violent. So it doesn't exactly model peace the way I think we both would like to model peace, but it's a very addictive show.
I should know it. It's Ertugrul.
I know.
The whole world knows it.
But so I think Urs has passed me. She binge watched it. The episodes are only 40 minutes or 44 minutes. So I've mostly been watching just one a night. Each year has about 100+ episodes. Mm-hmm. But I think Urs maybe has passed me. I am still on season 4. Knowing the speed that she was watching it, she might be on season 5, so I don't want her to give any spoilers here.
I am on season 5. I'm halfway through.
There you go. So he's not allowed to tell me.
You can't talk about it.
No.
Well, I don't think. Go ahead, Urs.
I just want to say, Sharon, just to share a little bit about Karen, while she's been fantastic as a poet, an author, a writer, a documentary person, I forget the name, but a filmmaker. I have found, just knowing Karen as someone who has seriously wanted to see peace in the Middle East through our Shalom Salam Toronto gatherings. It was just really nice to meet somebody who had the same passion and who just genuinely wanted to, let's have dialogue. Let's try to see how we can talk and work through some of the difficult conversations. And, it's been, that's how we started. But, when we started sharing conversations over hummus and samosas, the friendship got deeper. And, eventually, I remember Karen was even hosting one of our movie nights at her house. which is quite the dedication to open up your home to many strangers.
Yeah,
So,
we had a big group. We had a big group that night, actually.
yes,
We
I
had like
remember that.
30 people crowded on
Yeah,
the floor. It
yeah,
was great.
it was fun, and and our friendship has gone beyond Shalom Salam. Anytime, we can talk about different things, and really, um, you know, we really move forward with our friendship, and I'm really sad that you moved away from our greater Toronto area, but I'm glad that we have online means to still chat and connect. And now
And
this.
now this, we should talk about Shalom Salam at another maybe time, because there are a lot of stories, very emotional moments. I've been involved with Shalom Salam, not as long as you, but my involvement, my first time I was at Art Gallery of Ontario for another documentary screening about Indigenous youth. And it was the time when I entered the place, Karen asked me, like, are you here for Shalom Salam? And I said, no, but I am interested. So that's how I was involved. And I know we'll be maybe speaking about this at another chance. But today, Karen, I'd like to start the conversation on this amazing, super powerful documentary, which after I watched it, is it only me, or is it like, did everybody had a smile on their face after watching this? You made something that is super organic and has a piece from all of us. So would you share your story? What is the story there?
Me?
Yes, please.
So,
I don't.
okay, I guess
I don't.
the story began many years ago. I guess it was in 1985 in the fall when my ex and I went to buy that house on Little Italy. And at that time, there were hardly any people that weren't Italian on the street. And when I went to look at the house, it was in the fall, and I went out in the backyard. And instead of seeing backyards that were suburban and with green grass, everyone's backyard was a garden. And everyone's backyard was just filled, so lush, with tomato plants, pepper plants, zucchini, beans. And it looked like a small Eden. And the houses in Little Italy are very narrow. Our house was only 15 feet wide, and the backyards were narrow and long. But people didn't have at that time sort of bourgeois privacy fences. They had these school fences in between the yards, so you could actually see to many yards over. So it just looked like this lush green world. And I thought it was so enchanting. And interestingly enough, the people from whom we had bought that house had a fig tree in the backyard. And when we were bargaining for the house, they said it was even in the real estate announcement, this fig tree. But when we were bargaining for the house, they said, okay, we will take off, I don't know, $1,000 if we take the fig trees. And so this showed actually right from the start how precious these trees were, because people had actually brought them from Italy with them. And so it really showed me right from the get-go of how people preserve their cultures through their garden. And it was the gardens that made me fall in love with the neighborhood right from the beginning. And then I had a beautiful relationship with my neighbor, Senor Calderon. He was my next door neighbor, and I adopted him really as my nono. In Italian, the word for grandfather is, I think, nono. So he became like my Italian grandfather. And I was very, very close to him for 20 years. And it would just give me a great sense of peace to watch him garden. The neighborhood, over the years, the neighborhood changed because more manja cakes, that's what the Italian slang for somebody who's not Italian, like a Canadian, it's called manja cakes. More manja cakes moved in, and we didn't have the same talent for gardening, not initially. And people also put up more fences and made it look more like a white middle class neighborhood, which kind of broke my heart.
Mhm.
So the day that Mr. Calderon died, Senor Calderon, the day he died was the day I started that film. He died in the winter time, and his dried rose bushes, I could see them in the backyard, and I took a non-professional video camera and I went out and I just filmed the roses in the snow. And I thought, well, I want to make a movie, and this will be the end of my movie.
Mhm.
And it was really a labor of love to make that film. At that time, not the software that I used, Final Cut Pro, it wasn't as readily available, and it wasn't as easy to do editing on a laptop. So when I edited the film, I made it at a video cooperative. But I learned how to work the software myself. So the next film that I made, I edited it at home.
Mhm.
So I think I really have, I think, like Urs, a love and appreciation of many people's cultures. As a young woman, I had traveled a lot. I had hitchhiked across the Sahara Desert for 6 months through Algeria. I had hitchhiked across the Congo in Zaire. I had been to India twice, and I almost loved really every place that I ever went. So for me, I feel very at home and happy being with different cultures, and this was a film I could make and easily, and I just started to make it, even though I really didn't know exactly what I was doing when I started. I had had a career as a freelance magazine writer.
Mhm.
So in fact, making a documentary film, it's quite similar to a feature magazine piece. Because in a feature magazine story, you have a kind of thesis and you have interviews with people that you use to express your thesis, and you have storytelling, and you have an overlying narrative line. So it turned out it wasn't so hard, having written magazine stories for 25 years, to know how to make a documentary. It was just learning how to work the technology.
Well, I have a couple of questions, and the place I would like to really bring it to is about the fig tree. But before that,
Okay.
why is fig tree that important? Because I'm from Turkey, and in Turkey, fig trees are always there, and it's never an issue. You don't even like figs; they just grow, and we just eat them, and that's it. Like, why is fig tree a thing here in Toronto?
Well, it's because, and it's interesting you ask about the fig tree, because the fig tree is a Mediterranean tree. It's a southern Mediterranean tree. And of course, we are in a different climatic zone in Canada.
Mhm.
And in fact, probably historically, the most important thing that I captured in that film was the man burying his fig tree in the ground. Because if he wouldn't do that, the tree would not survive the Toronto winter.
Mhm.
Now, an Italian person told me now these trees, like initially when the Italian immigrants moved to Canada, they moved in great bulk in the 1950s. Actually, it's interesting to know that Canadians from the British Isles, that sort of the dominant immigrant group, did not eat a lot of vegetables. They, they didn't eat that many fruits and vegetables. They ate just kind of potatoes, squash, the kind of things, root vegetables in the ground. So when Italians moved to Toronto, they couldn't find the food that they loved. They couldn't find their arugula and their radicchio and their, different lettuces, and they weren't in the stores. So that was part of the reasons that they grew them themselves. Now, of course, we import everything.
Mm-hmm.
But to go back to the scene in which I captured him burying his fig tree, they only do that in Toronto.
Mm-hmm. That's why I want to focus on that. There is a big story there.
Well, there is, and it's interesting. Like somebody from Montreal of Italian heritage saw that film, and the Montreal person said, it was a rumor that in Toronto, Italians grew these fig trees and buried them in the ground with this hay, and that they lasted the winter. But we thought it was a myth. So now so your film showed that it wasn't a myth. Unfortunately, those fig trees in my film, they got so big that the guy couldn't bury them anymore. He had to chop down his fig trees.
Maybe now they are strong enough to handle the winter. They don't have to be buried now, maybe.
No.
Even that's a huge thing, Karen.
Yeah, no, they would not be strong enough. I guess if we get enough climate change in Toronto, we get some Mediterranean climate, then they won't have to be, they won't have to be buried.
Well, it seems like this group of people who moved here, and they knew what to do with the soil. They knew how to read the nature in their own needs and in their own DNA or in their own geography. And they wanted to bring things. And were they like city people? Did they actually know how to plant tomatoes? So because they just came directly to Toronto. Little Italy is really in the center of Toronto, right? It's like a city.
Yeah, it's in the downtown.
Would you share a little about that? The transitions
those
people had to go through.
Little Italy. Of course, there are multiple Little Italies, but the Little Italy that I lived in was near Clinton and College, in between Bathurst Street and Ossington Street, and around College. That was the first Little Italy. The very first few Italian immigrants, they came there in the 1910s. But really, the great migration of the Italian community to Toronto was after World War II in the late 1940s and 50s. And Italy was very, very devastated in World War II. It was devastated economically, and there was no work for people. So really, that is why the Italian community immigrated to Canada, and it was especially from the South, because the South was particularly devastated in the war.
So but it was not, Karen, I'm sorry about that, because there's a point that I will be making by the end. So it was not a movement, or it was not a move of a pleasure. People moved with their own traumas.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the people who came to Canada, they came from rural Italy. They had lived on farms, and they came, they came to this urban center, and many of the men worked, as a man says in the film, they worked in construction. They worked as laborers. Many of the men came before the women came. I mean, there were whole villages in rural Italy that were completely emptied out in the south. And there's still actually villages in the south of Italy where very few people live there.
So it was a it was war. Super people were really not ready to move. I mean, however can you be ready, but they were not, it was not their plan to move to a country who has two languages and who doesn't have fig trees. Now, like as like a, because I know and I am involved with in my own family, I'm involved with some people who are in nature, and it's like moving away from their village maybe is like a huge big torture. And we're talking about like they are moving to a land which there's no fig.
For sure, it was extremely traumatic and difficult. I mean, there is a great Canadian novel by a man. He was born in Canada, but it is this story. It's called Lives of the Saints by Nino Ricci. And it is a novel that records the trauma of the Italian community that had to emigrate from Italy en masse after World War II. It was more after the war that people came here. It wasn't during the war or before the war. It was after the war. So they were definitely economic refugees. They came here. We didn't call them refugees then, or economic refugees. And Canada also needed to rebuild. So they needed, I guess they needed the immigrants to come and to work, and the people came and worked very hard.
I think it's inspiring that you were able to really show in the documentary the Italian perspective of moving and coming here and starting their life, because as like it's a super Canadian thing to start a new life here, and people really, I mean, most of the people who have to move here, they bring their own traumas and they are healed here. So there's a big healing with planting, and this is the Italian version. I enjoy focusing on one culture and one country because I know there are different versions. Many people from different parts of the world have been moving to Canada, and they come in and they find the platform to heal here in Canada. So,
yeah. I mean, we are, unless you are an Aboriginal Indigenous Canadian, every single person in Canada is an immigrant. And there have been from the start waves of people coming here from, you know, the far corners of the world at different times. And yes, I think, I mean, my grandparents, both my grandmothers had a garden, and they grew in their garden. My grandmothers, they both grew tomatoes, and they grew parsley and dill. And I can remember going into, and they also had great grapevines to make very bad homemade wine. But so when I saw the gardens of Little Italy initially, it really reminded me of my grandmother's house. And in fact, my father came over very early on, well, just a day after I bought that house, and he saw the grapevine in my house and all the grapevines of my neighbors, and he wept because it reminded him of his mother's garden that she had on Arlington Avenue
Yeah.
when they came. Although they came from Russia and went initially to Saskatchewan. I don't know if she had a grapevine in Saskatchewan. Maybe she did. I don't know if it was warm enough to have a grapevine.
Well, let's open up for questions or comments. Would anybody like to come in and bring their questions, comments? What do you think? Just feel free to unmute yourself, friends. Of course, let's do one at a time.
Okay, I can start.
Mhm.
So when I saw how the Italian community really started bringing home to gardens by planting tomatoes and fig trees and all of the stuff that connected them to back home, you know, I thought that was very interesting, and you know, it really made me have a sense of appreciation um, for those gardens. In the past, I don't think I really paid much attention to gardens or gardening. Um, but this year, because of COVID, I decided to take on, you know, a couple of new projects, and one of them was gardening my own vegetables, and so and but in that process, well, you know, I picked up seeds and at times, you know, used the seeds from the produce that I was using myself and planted. You know, I also started thinking, no, I'm sure there's exotic vegetables that we get in, you know, other countries that we could have brought here, and so you know, I think that just watching the clip and or the documentary made me really appreciate you know, that connection uh, that they had to you know, bringing Italy into their backyards and growing their vegetables and really finding a special joy in not just gardening but also cooking the food that you produce, and so I just wanted to make that connection, how I'm really looking forward to my harvest as well. It's still in the early stages. I showed earlier, but I think Karen wasn't.
Yeah, can I see?
Yeah, so you know, there's my little container
Oh, nice.
garden. So I've got my radish, my peas, my carrots, some eggplant, basil, tomatoes, peppers, and then I've got some onions over here and some spinach. So you know, I just created this little patch, you know, amongst our little garden. So I thought that it was it really spoke to me, your documentary, and also spoke to how, you know, how the immigrant story began for Italians and Portuguese and many other communities. So it was nice. I was born here, so I don't have that connection, but my parents immigrated here, and you know, I don't think they really did what the Italians did. So you know, when it came to bringing their gardens into their backyards, but I really appreciated that. Thank you.
Were your parents from an urban area as opposed to a rural area?
Yeah, yeah, they were, I wouldn't say like modern city, but they were part of a city. And so there were no real farms or farming. There was no real farming culture, although my dad may have had more of a farming culture, but he just got busy working. You know, new immigrants, their first focus is we need to find a job and we need to like put food on our tables. And that was the focus. So gardening would have been a pastime, I think, if you had some time. And my mom was also you know, working, so I don't think it was really, but we had a little garden in Hamilton where we grew up, but it wasn't like a massive, you know, project like I saw in Little Italy. It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, I also have to comment that, of course, there's also people of Portuguese heritage in my film, and
Yes.
there was one woman who was Chinese from Vietnam also. And
saw that.
she grew things that were exotic to me, vegetables I didn't know.
Yeah.
And she spoke a lot about those vegetables healing powers. I didn't, she felt some of them were yin, like she was speaking about the yin and yang of
Yeah.
the vegetables. And she found some, she said they were hot and some were cool and they had different yin and yang purposes. The thing is, the people in my film, also many of them were older, like Mr. Calderon. He evidently, when he was really working hard, his garden was smaller. That in retirement, the people's gardens got bigger. Your garden looks great, Urs. I remember us speaking at the beginning of the pandemic, and you said, people are having pandemic projects and gardening, especially because people are having to stay home and be around their homes more. So if you got a little plot of land, that you can have a garden. I mean, it's interesting, like in World War II in Britain, they turned all of the public parks into gardens to grow food for people during the war. And they have a tradition in Britain of something called an allotment garden. And where if you don't have space, let's say you live in an apartment building, you can still have a plot of land just outside of town where you can grow vegetables. In Hyde Park, people have allotment gardens. And I know they're trying to have gardens also for people in more like, in housing projects to create gardens that people can work on. And someone watching my film said, this is a great thing that every senior's home should build raised beds where seniors can go out and garden, because it is a very, I don't know, Urs, have you found it a healing activity during the pandemic?
Yes, I have. It's been a distraction and something that every day I look forward to seeing, how much more has my garden grown, how much more has the sprouts come out, so it's been really a good distraction for me too.
Sam just mentioned that about Victory Gardens. Sam, would you like to share a little about that?
Yeah, I think those are my understanding. I may be wrong about the same gardens in London and Britain during World War II. I think they used to also call them Victory Gardens.
They did. And I think that it was like the Queen inspiring people to do it, actually. And it's a great use of land. I mean, people now, because of the pandemic in Toronto, want to put gardens in their front yards also, because grass requires it's a monoculture. It doesn't attract bees. It requires a lot of fertilizing. It requires weed killers. Grass is not really a very environmental crop. It's much more environmental to make a garden, just for the earth too, in terms of the bees, the butterflies, the insects. It's good for so many reasons, and it feeds us. I have a very big garden here. I don't know if you'll be able to see. But I made it smaller. It was really huge and I couldn't manage it, but I don't know if you'll be able to see it.
Oh yeah. Oh.
It's got a big fence. It's got a big fence around it, because here I'm on a deer highway, and the deer came and ate all my vegetables. So I had to put up an 8-foot high fence to keep the deer out of the garden.
So Karen, I have a metaphoric question. If we have any other comments or questions, dear friends, go ahead.
One minor comment. in terms of, yeah, this exact issue that you mentioned, the deer, and there's, on YouTube, there are many videos of people who had their garden and then this groundhog showed up and, they get upset that, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit torn, that wildlife, they also have a right to, the garden, but people get, obviously, they're not too happy if some, groundhog shows up and starts ripping out their veggies from the and just, eating them. So yeah,
Yeah,
just a tragic situation in terms of, you know, apparently there are foxes that are being seen in Toronto, which haven't been seen for a long time. So yeah, and like all these types of war, pandemic, that's good for the animals, but then certainly humans come back.
We were
yeah,
never trained to live with deers or foxes, so we don't know what to do.
yeah. In the film, like the gardeners are fighting the squirrels, and on Clinton Street, it was terrible with the raccoons because the raccoons would just know when the grapes were sweet.
Oh.
You just would be waiting for those grapes to be sweet to eat them, and you think they would just need maybe 1 or 2 more days, and then you'd go outside, and that night the raccoons would come and eat every single grape. So I didn't capture this, but I knew of a man, and he built like an entire cage around his whole grapevine to keep the raccoons away. I know a Vietnamese man got in trouble in Toronto banging a raccoon on the head
Oh my goodness. Okay.
with his shovel. I mean, because he just thought it's like,
I mean, it's a big steal if you have been working and waiting on that, taste that you will remind you of home and your own work.
Exactly.
So I could little empathize there.
Exactly.
Yeah, Eva, I want to say something.
Go ahead, please. Ask me.
Yeah, like I'm from India, and over there we had a little garden in our house, the backyard garden. And I remember I was small, and my mom had some operation, and when she was at home, she was a teacher, but when she was during the sick days after the surgery, was just sitting and making the garden. And within those 2-3 months, we had a beautiful vine of vegetables growing in, like cucumbers and everything, right? So that was in my mind. And when we bought the house in 2007, the like behind my house, the jungle, after the central street, we have the jungle. So I just my kids were small, so we waited for a few years, and then we started building the backyard. And now, by the grace of God, we have a beautiful backyard. My kids help in the COVID-19, we worked a lot in that, and we leveled the whole of the backyard. And every year I used to plant the trees. The raccoon and the squirrel, they used to come and eat away everything. We used to get hardly few tomatoes and few cucumbers, but still I used to think it's okay. Like, I'm working for myself, for my healing. It's okay if the food is for them. It's the God has it is the in our language we call it risk. So the risk is in my garden. Their food is written in my garden, so it's okay, they'll come and eat from my garden. So but now, like, it's a beautiful garden. I won't be able to show you right now because it's at the back. So it is a good healing. I would say that every summer I eagerly wait for that. And we all work for a few hours every weekend. And I work usually every day for half an hour or sometimes, and look at my garden. I watch every leaf growing, and it's really, really a good feeling, and a good exercise also.
Yes.
Myself fresh, keep myself fresh. And indoor plants, I have a lot of indoor plants, and I call all my plants babies. So my kids, I have 2 kids, 17 and 14 and a half. So they call, Mama, you care for these kids or you care for me? And these kids do not do anything. They just keep sitting. I say, it's okay. It's okay.
Well,
I said, these kids are quiet. So they say, okay, Mama, if we be quiet, you won't let us work. Like, but they enjoy. They also enjoy and take care of my plants, and they water them when I'm not able to, and feed, the fertilizers, soil, and I have a healthy indoor and outdoor plants.
Nice.
Azmi, thank you.
That's really nice. Where in India did you come from?
I came from UP, Allahabad, Lucknow, that belt. I was born in Kanpur, my grandma's house, my mother's house. Then my father's house is Allahabad. Yeah, it was Allahabad is called Oxford of the East. The university over there.
Yeah, so UP is Uttar Pradesh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Uttar Pradesh. I'm from Uttar Pradesh.
Okay, cool. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Azmi. You mentioning your and comparing your plants with your kids. They're, they're,
They
well, I can hear the metaphor because I work with families who have to homeschool their children in this pandemic. So it's just like, I know many parents will be hearing that sometimes plants are less problematic.
And I teach also.
Let's say.
Even I'm a teacher. I teach in one of the schools. Then right now I'm teaching online, and then I have the kids. It's a good experience. It was a good experience to take care of everything on time. The kids, the plants, and the tutoring, everything was well organized.
So it was kind of like planning. Having a garden was planning your timing and your days. Would you agree with that, Azmi?
Yeah, I used to agree. I used to plan myself and agree to it that it needed a lot of planning, but I did a healthy planning. Like I used to get up early in the morning when the sun was not there in the backyard. I used to do digging and all the cleaning and a bit of exercise. And then when the sun was high in the sky, I used to take care of the kids and teach them inside. And then again in the evening, little bit of more gardening. So I had to plan, but everything was well connected.
Yeah, the question I would like to ask now, Karen, is a little bit of a metaphoric question. You have to understand, I have ADHD and I work with people who have ADHD in the family setting. So I need to really think things in different dimensions to really understand. And I would like to ask you now, what were you trying to share with us in the documentary? Because there are kids, there's the next generation there. So it's not only about the first immigrants who made the move, it's the second generation, bambinos as they call the children. So while these first immigrants who faced the huge problematic moving and belonging, staying here, and not having the vegetables, or let's say again the fig here, so they faced the huge big crush of the moving, even the cultural moving maybe, and they, can we say, like, the only thing, not the only thing maybe, but the main thing they wanted to focus, they could focus, was planting, because they knew that. So in coaching, if there's a trauma, the first place we would like to start with a coaching partner is what is easy for you, what is possible for you, and how much of your time and how much of your being would you like to invest on this easy, arm reach and familiar thing. It seems these first Italian I'll say newcomers or immigrants, they started doing what they knew best. And did them, like the first generation planting, did it really help for the next generation, for their children, or maybe now for their grandchildren to adapt and belong as like Canadians, especially at a time now where like the skin of the color or the country you were born or your background and religion is a reason to lose your life or go into problematic things. So I know I asked a lot, but just
Okay.
find your own way to answer it now.
Okay, so I think in the film, you see there are some younger people. There's a few of the children of the people in the film. There's Sarah Crush's son, Bruno, who I know actually, and there is another woman. I'm not sure that the garden enabled the children of the immigrants to fit into Canada, because the children, for the most part, were born in Canada. So they were, it's like they were born here, so they didn't have the same trauma of immigration, of loss of home. Many of them did speak Italian in their homes, but then from a very young age, they went to school. So English became their first language. I think for me, the movie, interestingly enough, even though I'm a poet, the movie does not have a huge metaphoric meaning the way a fictional film did. What I really just wanted to do was to create a snapshot and capture a culture while it still existed. Because we don't have many people moving from Italy now to Canada. Because Italy is, especially in the north, Italy is much wealthier now, 60, 75 years after the war. There is not a reason for Italians to move en masse to Canada.
Well,
So
go ahead. I have a metaphor for you from the movie, if you like.
Okay.
Would you like to finish, or can I jump in?
No, interrupt.
No.
It's great because the viewer would have their own meaning in the movie.
Yeah, it's definitely there for me. You said, like, after you moved into Little Italy, like they didn't like too many people who were not born in Italy. Who were not Italian originated. Well, you are not Italian originated, and you were adopted by your Italian grandparent, Nana, Nono.
No.
So how did that happen? Because you are not Italian, and you are a stranger, but they welcomed you, and it's a big connection now. You can tell their story to us. So I think this is a huge metaphor that you are bringing that time to us. And I think that generation planting was a therapeutic act for the next generation, because they were not raised with problematic parents in a way. That's how I would like to see it, at least.
You mean that the children were in those homes, they did have good, strong connections to their parents, but I mean, there's an Italian woman poet from my neighborhood named Gianna Patriarca.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote a book called Italian Women and Other Tragedies. So she Italian parents tended to actually be very protective. some of the younger generation might have found them overprotective. And also because they're Catholic, the Catholic faith tends to have a sense of guilt. And I think that, well, Jana would have to, if she were here, she could answer the question better. I know that in her poetry speaks about what it is like to be of that generation.
Mhm.
You know, when I made that film, there wasn't, now in terms of making films, writing things, you know, there are some people who believe in as the notion of cultural appropriation, and that if you are not from a certain culture, you are not permitted to tell another culture's story. I found, though, that the Italians, they embraced that film. It showed also at the Toronto Italian Film Festival. It showed at the Hamilton Italian Film Festival. I found that, and I showed it in Schaumburg last summer, and there were people of Italian descent there too. And some of the Italians cried because they captured the memory of their grandparents, you know, who are no longer with us. And I mean, I feel very emotional when I watch that film again, because so many of the people in that film have passed. They were older when I filmed them in 2007.
Mhm.
So they've actually, you know, 13 years later have passed away, many of those people.
So
And-
how come you were not a stranger for them? You were not Italian. So how did that happen?
You know, I think it's because I think it's just my personality, because I actually, like I said, I love traveling, and for some reason I'm the kind of person, and I feel deeply at home in really like the world. I feel very at home with people of every culture, and I think that people sense that about me. So people, and maybe because I'm short and don't have a big imposing presence, people usually don't feel frightened by me or threatened by me, or so. And also people usually sense if you are truly deeply interested
Mhm.
in what they're doing. This is like, as a journalist, if you are researching a story, I mean, I think that you really can't fake interest and love of people. But when you are truly, truly interested and passionate about what someone else is doing, people are so happy to share it with you, because they sense that you are interested in it. You know, like some of those people's children, like they wouldn't have thought to make a movie about their parents in their gardens. Even there is, I mean, there, but not, but there are artists in the neighborhood, like I should say, Gianna Patriarco. There's a photographer, Vincenzo Pietro Paolo, who's a lot of his stuff is in Toronto and Ontario archives, and he has done a masterful job of recording things in the neighborhood for 50, 60 years.
Mhm.
But these are artists too, who can see the beauty, you know, in something. You know, other people might say, oh, how are you going to make a movie about just people in their gardens? They wouldn't see the story.
Well, it was inspiring to see, especially the people who they look tired at times, but still they kept working. And I'm curious to really feel that, like, you are tired, but you know you need to either harvest those tomatoes or make that paste that day, because the food will go away. So the value of the programming of your time, the time management, and how you witness your grandparents doing the same thing every year of that time. Now, I know about that guilt. I'm not Italian. However, I am Turkish. I was raised in Turkey a part of my life, and I have been Turkish originated parents, so I use all that guilt in my children. I'm healing. My children are healing too. So we're learning. But I know how that transition, how hard that can be. And with as like living in your own community, even if you are in another country, but just like it's very dangerous to be living in an island of maybe your home country and not being out there. But it seems your power to make friends and be neighbors, you were able to, and they were able to adapt. And I think that's a big value for the children who were born here. And they have a Auntie Karen, who is not Italian originated, but, still as like making a documentary about their grandparents. I think because I work with children, I can't stop but see from that perspective of the value you're carrying to the next generation.
Yeah, and I think that, I know that Jana has a garden, and I think sometimes things we learn from our parents, we don't do them for many years, and then we return to them when we ourselves are in our 60s, say, like to hear parents' stories, to, the perspective on life changes as we age. And some things that we may not have valued when we were young, 30, 40 years passed, and suddenly you really value those things.
Mm-hmm.
I think Urs is a pretty traditional person. I'm also in my own way, a traditional person.
Mm-hmm. How would you define that traditional person you are, Karen? Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think wanting to make a garden, like my grandmother had a garden, still like keeping some things from my Jewish faith, even though I'm not with a Jewish man. It's not as easy now that I live in Magneto because there are no synagogues here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just keeping my religious traditions to a certain degree, not in a very strict way.
Mm-hmm.
Just cooking. I kind of, I love cooking, which is a traditionally women-centric activity in my culture. I guess like that. And I'm not overtly feminist, although I do make my sweetie clean the dishes. I don't let him
That's
get
good for good
Yeah.
for him.
Yes.
I wanted to just remark, maybe we can bring it to questions or answers after this, that like a fig, I was really impressed to see the fig here, and I had no idea. I didn't even question like why there wouldn't be fig in Toronto until the first Italian immigrants, because they had to bring it. So I saw the value of staying connected to your own true self when you have to move out of it and bring what with you. You just bring whatever you can take, like emergency stuff. And the emergency stuff they brought to Toronto was their planting. At least their planting stuff was in it. But what did they do? They brought fig here. It's like, it's Little Italy in Toronto. I think their love on their well-being, first original being, and maybe their adaptation to Toronto. Now there is Little Italy.
I mean, people who've seen that film, academics have remarked how, imagine they have just one suitcase, they're coming on the boat, and they took those tools. They took their farming tools, their special planting tools that their parents had made. So, I mean, that shows how important their attachment to the earth, was, and to bring their food. Everyone likes to have their food. And these things transcend the, Italian culture. Certainly, I think that's why when people move to Toronto, they like to live in the neighborhoods with their own people. It doesn't necessarily mean they're racist, but like Jewish people moved together because they wanted to have their synagogues, they wanted to have their kosher food, they wanted to have butcher shops that were kosher, they wanted to have the things that that they ate in Europe, and which mirrors every culture is a mirror of that. But then I think now, like when I look at my nieces, for example, neither of them are marrying Jewish boys. One's marrying a Filipino, one married just a Canadian whose parents came from England. The other married a Filipino Canadian boy. So that their children will be a mix of Filipino and Jewish, and the next, I think, often, especially, well, it used to be with Jewish people, they didn't intermarry because there was more anti-Semitism. But now, if you get rid of, the more you get rid of racism, the more the kids rebel, and they just want to become Canadian. Unless you're very strict, they don't necessarily, that after the people have been here several generations, they don't want to necessarily follow all those traditions. They want to love who they want to love. They want to listen to the music they want to listen to. And to some degree, I think this is a good thing.
Isn't it like when it's a privilege to be part of more than one cultures, maybe, or like when it's a privilege to have a diverse background, and when you can talk about it and when you grow into it, that's what we should be talking and appreciating and mentioning more, because again, this is a time that we have to really find the privilege on the moving and what it brings you, and becoming more diverse, maybe not afraid of becoming more diverse.
Well, I really love cultural mixes. I love it with art, I think the best art is like mixtures of music. Like when I traveled in Africa, I love African pop music, which is such a mixture of things. Mixture of Latin music came from Africa, it went to the Caribbean, it went back to Africa, it went to Brazil, and I think humanity flourishes when we have a mix of cultures.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen. I know we could talk more about this, but I'd like to open up for questions or answers, questions or comments. Would anybody like to? Sam, thank you for the links you have been sharing. Would you like to tell us a little about them?
Well, one is like a famous scene, I'm sure everybody has seen it, of a famous Italian grandfather who's, tending his garden. So I won't say anymore. Once you see it, you'll recognize.
Oh, I know. It's the Godfather. I know what it is. Yes, yeah, I know what it is.
Can I share it? Can I share it? I don't know what it is, but is it something?
I know what it is. I'm guessing.
Is it something I can share? Is it okay?
Sure.
Which one? Which link is it?
I think maybe the second one.
Okay.
I usually shorten them because yeah, I actually am working on different computers, so this allows me to copy and share. And
Okay.
also a good one on fig trees. And this is a very good article on fig trees about how they have always been in all kinds of philosophies. Aristotle was talking about fig trees, and I mean, there in India, in so many places, yeah, fig trees are very important. Buddha and all that. So
Yeah.
just something interesting.
Okay. I think I will be able to share it. I made it.
Yes,
It's gonna
I
play
knew
fast.
what it was. I guessed what it was.
Yeah. Okay. It's gonna play fast now, so I'm gonna start it now. Let's see. Thank you, Sam.
Come in. Come in. Mira, pues dispara, dispara. Anthony, come here, come here. Come on. That's what, put it away. That's what, come on. Come on. Stand there. Musa. Oh, 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 oh.
Where are you? Yeah. I like you.
You made my day. You made Eva. Do you know what that is?
No.
You made. Do you know what that is, Urs? She might. No. Oh, he made my day.
Okay. Give us a little hint so we can go and watch with that.
Okay, well, that's actually it's a violent movie, but it is one of my favorite movies of all times and probably one of the best movies, and it's from the movie The Godfather. Which was and wow, I haven't seen that movie in many years, and I never would have remembered that scene. That blows me away. So that's Marlon Brando playing.
So why is that
Vito
scene
Corleone.
that important for you, Karen?
Because it just shows how iconic it is to have the tomato plants. That really, the tomato plants, like pomodoro, like that guy says in my film, the apple of gold, that the tomato, it's so significant, it's prominent in Italian cooking. So really, if you are going to create the most famous character in Italian and American cinema, you are going to show him with his tomato garden. Oh, wow.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. I think this was a good finale. I had
I
no
remember
idea.
actually, sorry to interrupt, but just in terms of like, I'm also a movie buff. So when they were like, Francis Ford Coppola was like, not many people even knew of him. He was like, not a major director.
That's
But
right.
the guy who was head of Paramount Studios, I think his name was Robert Evans. He's like a legendary figure in Hollywood history. And he said the only man who should direct a movie on this topic should not only be Italian, he should be so Italian that I can smell the spaghetti sauce, tomato sauce.
Wow.
So which is very important because I just saw a movie Ragtime, which is considered a very good movie, Milos Forman, Oscar winner. But I felt that he is European, he really, I mean, he didn't seem to have the real instinctual understanding of what life in North America is all about. So just my
Right.
2 cents.
Right, that's really interesting. And what was the other, you said one's about a fig tree and one's about the victory gardens.
No, and another one is about animals who, use your garden and like, yeah, it's a cute little clip, but it is yeah, I'm more partial to animals than trees. So.
Well, thank you, Sam. So Karen, I'm gonna stop recording soon. We can stay
Yeah.
here, but I'll have to stop the recording.
That's okay. I gotta go and I'm cooking spaghetti tonight.
Okay, that's good. Maybe I should cook some spaghetti too tonight. But before you go, what would you like to end this conversation? Thank you very much for this inspiring perspective. It showed me a lot, and it's a pleasure. It was a pleasure to discuss it with you. What would you like to leave us with now about your documentary about the work?
Maybe I should leave you with the poem.
Oh, perfect.
If I can find the poem. See, this is very bad. Normally I'm very prepared. But if I cannot find it. Okay. So this is from my first book of poetry. And so I started long before the film, I was writing poems for Mr. Calderon. So this is called Spring Prophecy. Before the melt, he's over our fence, poised on the spry stool, bare head grazing clouds. Deaf to his daughter's worried chorus, between rungs of the trellis, he spies tangled twiggy shoots still asleep. The spent season's tendrils corkscrewing the air in unanswered search for a hold. Then sets to work, his shears flash, snip this then that without a stutter. Each fluent clip echoes gnarled hills. Afterwards, cuttings plume from turned earth, a rain of sap drums the deck. His words are ripe as grapes. When the vine she is weeping, the wine she will be good.
Wow.
Which is what Mr. Calderon said to me. When the vine she is weeping, the wine she will be good.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was lovely to meet you, Asma, and
Asmi. I'm Asmi, Karen.
Asmi, and Sam.
Sam.
Do you both live in Toronto?
I live in a country called Texas.
You're coming from Texas. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And Asmi?
Yeah, I'm in Brampton, GTA, Greater Toronto. Yeah.
Are you friends of hers? Were you at the last Shalom Salam meeting?
Yes, we are friends. Urz and I
Okay.
are friends. Yeah, she invited me, so I'm here today. Thank
Sam,
you so much.
And Sam has been a member of Toronto Philosophy Meetup, so we have been in different philosophy meetups before. So this is a good connection. This has been good sharing. Nice Sunday afternoon, and I'm gonna stop recording. Thank you very much everyone for joining, and see you at another meeting.
Thank you.
Ciao, everybody. Thank you.